Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. I'm Dan, Warpaint JKU. You found this video because you want to learn everything there is to know about a high lift jack. How to use it, how to maintain it, when to use it, what the accessories are, like what the heck is this thing? Well guys, we're going to talk about all of it, so stay tuned and check it out. Hey guys, so before we get into the accessories and how to use the high lift, and by the way, stay tuned to the end of this video because I'm going to show you guys a really awesome accessory that makes the high lift a lot safer to use and also a lot less damaging to the environment in certain situations. I'll show you how to install it and why it's important. But before we get to any of that, let's talk really quickly about Warpaint. Warpaint is a 2015 JKU. And she's pretty built, right? We got 40-inch tires on Raceline beadlocks. We got 1-ton axles. We got hydraulic steering. We have, 3-link long arm suspension, front and rear, tons of flex. I wheel big stuff, travel around. You guys have seen it, especially over on the Instagram. And a question I get asked a lot is, why am I using a high lift, right? Well, guys, not only do I use high lift, but I also choose to work with high lift and represent them. And the reason I do that is because they employ American citizens, right? Which is pretty cool, right? The American stuff. And guys, high lifts are simple. They work, they last, they're strong. Anything when you're talking automotive and lifting lots of weight can be dangerous. But high lifts are very safe if you know how to use one. And like I said, they also don't overcharge for them, right? I feel like there's a lot of jack options out there that only do one thing. They lift. High lifts do that, but they also do a lot of other stuff that we're going to talk about in this video, and especially the common things. But I like the high lift because they don't rip people off for the cost, and it's super strong and super durable, and they last a very long time. So without further ado, guys, let's jump into the high lift jack. There's a few very basic accessories that we need to have in our Jeep at all times in order to successfully use our high lift in the safest manner possible. Now, I like the high lift base, okay? Because the bottom of a high lift basically fits right in here, and the bottom of your high lift can be used either with a stamped steel base or a cast base. Either one will fit directly inside of this. Now, it also has these teeth made into it. It's plastic, but it's extremely strong. It's got this texture on the bottom to help it grip the ground, and it just basically expands the footprint, making it more stable. Now, in order to make it stable, we need a jack stand. You don't necessarily need an enormous jack stand, but you do need one to like hold up your axle in certain situations. We'll talk about that in just a second. These two guys are some really cool accessories that we're going to talk about. We'll talk about that guy later because you may have to modify your high lift in order to fit that properly, and I'll show you what this weird strap thing is used for in just a minute. With those accessories, as well as the basic things that most of us hopefully have in our recovery gear bags, you can get yourself out of pretty much any situation off-road and even fix your Jeep when it's damaged. These high lift jacks are great because they have so many uses. Now, while you can jack your vehicle, which I will show you how to do in just a second, just to basically show you the operation and function of the jack, you can also use this jack as a winch, okay, in certain situations. We'll talk about why you would maybe want to do that when your Jeep probably has a winch on the front bumper, especially if you're going off-roading. It's a really good idea to have one of those as well as one of these. Now, as a winch, that is something that other jacks cannot do, okay? And that's why I like to use this, because it's more than just a jack. It's an actual versatile tool for the trails that has other purposes. Now, speaking of tools, I actually also use my high lift jack to break the bead when I'm mounting tires on my beadlocks. So using your high lift and the weight of your vehicle can actually break your inner bead as well. So I use it for that. You can also use it, now this is something that high lift does not recommend that you use it for, but I have used it for this, and you can use it as something called a cast off. Now that actually can be dangerous. So we'll talk very quickly about that, and I really don't recommend you do that. Now, as far as maintenance on your jack goes, there are a couple of parts down here at the base that we're going to talk about that need to be maintained, especially if you are storing your jack in harsher environments outside where it gets dirty and dusty. So let's get a closer look and talk about those. This lever up here basically determines what the action of the jack is going to be and whether it's actually going to jack something up or release it and let it back down. And then you have two pins, and these pins kind of work together to actually either climb with these holes, all right, or come back down. And maintenance is key here, because if these get all rusted and corroded and dry, they're gonna get hung up, they're not gonna slide like they're supposed to, and your jack isn't going to function the way that it is supposed to. So they do make boots and covers to kind of keep the weather and the dirt and the dust out if you're keeping it outside. Now, of course, you can store it outside, and that's what I do. Mine is on the hood of my Jeep. Now, my Jeep spends its time in the garage when I'm not actually out driving it, but even in those environments, when I wash it in the driveway, it's getting baked by the sun, it gets dusty and dirty at the off-road park. I take it home, I rinse it off, and I re-oil and lubricate those pins a few times a year just to make sure that they stay in working condition so the tool is ready when I need it most. At this point, let's jack up the Jeep. I'm going to show you an up-close view of the jack working its magic, and then we'll talk about the accessories and where they come into play. So with this lever actually in the up position, that's how we jack the this part of the jack up, right? Make sure this is up. And now watch for a second. As I move the handle and pump the handle, you'll see these pins kind of moving and locking as the jack raises. Now, a couple of safety things that we're going to talk about here really quickly with the high lift jack. And obviously we're at the point now where we're pretty high up and the jack is ready to start lifting the front of the Jeep. Now, one of the safety things, we mentioned it before, is a base, right? You want to make sure that your base is big enough, wide enough, flat enough, and stable enough to support the weight that you are going to be putting on it. But that's the same with any jack. The other thing that you're going to want to watch is this handle, okay? The jack handle up here, especially when you're releasing it, you want to maintain control of this at all times, and you want to stand clear of it. This handle's not going to come sideways. It's only going to go toward the jack and away from the jack, toward the jack and away from the jack. So if you're standing behind it, right, like I am right now, and you're starting to let it down, bad idea. Because that handle can actually sit there and pump on its own with the weight of the Jeep as it drops. And, you know, I mean, it'll knock your teeth out. I mean, it's a steel pipe. No one wants to get hit in the face with that, right? So like with any jack, stand clear of things that are moving and things that are raising or lowering when you are using it. Now, another big safety item is jacking points, okay? You need a place to secure the jack and actually have it do its thing and lift your vehicle. You want it to be lifting on metal, not plastic, of course. And when I say metal, I don't mean body panels, okay? Body panels are not thick enough metal and strong enough metal. So steel bumpers, right? Things like that will work just fine. Steel rock sliders, and I don't mean the look-alike rock sliders that are cheap. I mean the heavy ones, okay? The ones that, you know, like these are welded to my frame. They're not gonna go anywhere with the weight of the Jeep on it, right? Again, steel bumpers, right? All of those things will help you basically lift your vehicle or take pressure off of the suspension so that you can lift your vehicle safely. Now, we mentioned before safety, and I didn't like where the footprint of the jack was before over here because of the crack and the change in elevation from that part of my driveway to this part. I moved it onto a flatter section. Now, if we were on the trail and it was dirt, that's when you would use the teeth on that edge of this plate to actually scrape a more flat surface and get yourself a bigger, safer footprint to lift the vehicle. Now, at this point, you would never get under a vehicle that's supported by a jack ever, okay? You would always want it on a jack stand, And that's why we mentioned the jack stand is one of the accessories that you would want in the future. Now at this point, doing something like this where we've lifted the vehicle from the bumper has opened and taken a lot of the pressure off of our spring. So again, you wouldn't want to reach your fingers in there, because if the jack was ever to fail or drop, you wouldn't want to crush your fingers, right? But a lot of the time this can be used when a spring unseats, because you flexed off-road to the point where the spring fell. You can actually do this kind of thing and get the spring back where it belongs. Now, the other thing that this high lift jack can be used for before, as we said, was as a winch, kind of like a come along. Up here, you can basically put a chain, a hook, a strap, something like that on the top, right? Kind of lay it on its side. Attach that to something like a recovery ring. So let's talk for a second and pretend that our vehicle was starting to slide off of a trail or off of the line that we wanted to be on. And we could use our winch that's on our front bumper to help get it back where we want it to be. But a lot of the time when you're pulling the front of the vehicle sideways, not forward, right? When you're pulling it sideways, the back of the vehicle slides. So what you can do is essentially put something on this, hook it around a tree, right, on the trail, all right, so that the jack is kind of in between. You have one end of it secured to the tree, and you have the other end secured to something like a D-ring on your back bumper. At that point, what you would then do is, like I said, to the tree, to another strap going to your back bumper. And what you would do then is put some pressure on the jack, just like we just did, just like you're jacking the vehicle. And when you do that, okay, it winds up just holding the vehicle with a lot of pressure, stopping it from sliding in a direction that you don't want it to. And then you can allow the front end to basically be pulled back onto the trail. Right? We're getting into some more technical recovery type work, but that's what high lift jacks are used for. They're not just jacks, they're versatile tools. Now, if you ever wanted to use your high lift jack to maybe change a flat tire, that's where this accessory comes in. It basically bolts to the front of the jack. This rubber block then sits against the tire, okay, and these hooks hook on to holes in your wheel. Now that allows you to then use the high lift jack to lift the wheel off the ground, right? As you just saw, by lifting the body of the Jeep, Jeeps have so much suspension in them by the time we modify them that you have to lift it so high in order for that suspension to fully droop to then lift the tire off the ground. So starting by lifting the actual wheel and tire off the ground will help and get it off the ground much, much, much faster. And that's why you also don't really need a jack taller than 48 inches. You can lift that off the ground, slide a jack stand under the axle, lower it back down, and now safely remove your wheel and tire. And that leads me to our last accessory, all right, before I show you guys how to install it. And that is the trail stamp, okay? It's available at trailstamp.com. They also have an Instagram page. You might want to check that out. But inside of your box, your trail stamp basically comes with a card that explains the direction process on how to mount it. And it comes with a couple of foam pieces of tape to help it fit a little bit more securely. And it's basically a big rubber stamp. Now, the stamp part of that is the novelty, right? In certain conditions, if it's a little bit muddy or a little bit, soft soil outside, it will leave a stamp. They make them for companies and things that can use them to advertise. But at the same time, this basically substitutes that red base over there. So while it's not large, okay, and it doesn't necessarily expand the footprint much, it does give it an immense amount of grip, okay? And it also saves and cushions things like tree roots on the trail and things like that. Now, in order to get this to fit on the stamped steel base, if we had the cast base, it would just fit right in here, no problem. On the edges where the steel kind of curves up, we basically just have to cut that off to make it narrow enough to fit inside of this. You're not actually compromising any strength. The steel is still plenty strong. We're gonna use a grinder and cut that off and then get it back into our trail stamp. I'll show you how to do it. And we're gonna grind from the bottom and just take this curved lip off. course, use ear protection, and we're gonna get it going. And there we have it, guys, right? The rubber foot on the stamped steel base, and that allows us to have that security when we're off-road and we are in maybe a slippery situation. You got to put it on a tree root, things like that. It gives it just so much more grip and stability. But anyway, guys, I hope this video helped you, because I know I'm not in the environment to necessarily show you exactly how to use the high lift in all of its different ways, but those are the common ways that I use the high lift. Like I mentioned before, breaking the inner bead on a beadlock when I'm mounting them myself at my own home, jacking up the front of the vehicle or the rear of the vehicle to help seat springs. I haven't had that issue on my rig, but I've had it on other friends' rigs. It helps there. I have also used it to get it off of things that the Jeep might have been stuck on, push it off of an obstacle, or even, like I said before, hold the back, kind of use it as like almost like a come along, and hold the back of the vehicle so that we can then winch the front in a different direction without the back shifting. There are just so many options. Again, don't go under your vehicle without it being positioned on a jack stand, but that is the same with any jack. I don't care if it's a hydraulic floor jack or anything. You never go under a vehicle when it's supported by something like a jack. They have moving parts, they can fail. They are not meant to hold a vehicle up for an extended period of time with you safely laying underneath it. But guys, there you have it, okay? I hope this video helped you. If you have any questions, let me know. You can definitely leave a comment below. That's it. I hope you guys get out and build something, and I hope you subscribe to the channel. We have a lot more coming.